public can expect faster and more accessible internet soon. This as new telecommunications companies have been invited to do business in the Philippines. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says President Duterte offered China the privilege to operate the third telco carrier in the country. The country has also partnered with an affiliate of social networking giant Facebook to provide additional internet infrastructure in the Philippines. Roque reveals the agreement with Facebook should have been signed as early as 2016. He says this was delayed by then Information and Communications Technology Secretary Rodolfo Salalima.
It was not signed by the former Secretary of the DICT, and this was one of the areas pinpointed by cabinet investigators as an area of conflict of interest for the former Secretary of the ICT. It was further reported by the Special Investigating Committee that the former DICT Secretary likewise may have prevented the earlier breakup of the duopoly by delaying the use of satellites as viable option.
The Philippines' internet services rank among the slowest in Asia Pacific. Last year, President Duterte warned telco providers to shape up or face new competition. Most of the people living in poverty in Southeast Asia are Filipinos and Indonesians. That's according to a publication launched by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, China, and the United Nations Development Program. It reports about 36 million people in the region still live below the poverty line. Almost 90% of these people are in Indonesia or the Philippines. The report also states that while extreme poverty fell across the region from 2005 to 2013, many working poor remain vulnerable to falling back to poverty. Former Transportation Secretary June Abaya, along with officials of the MRT's previous maintenance provider, are facing yet another graft complaint. This time, the case was filed by the militant group Bayan. It's urging the government to take over the train system's maintenance instead. Our Claire Yao has that story.
The government may have fired Busan Universal Rail as the MRT's official maintenance provider, but the issues hounding it are far from over. Militant group Bayan has filed a graft complaint at the Office of the Ombudsman against Buri and former transport officials, including then-Secretary Joseph Abaya. Supporting the complaint, 25 boxes of evidence. Bayan says these will show just how anomalous the MRT deal is. Its first allegation, Abaya entered into a contract with Buri that was grossly disadvantageous to the government and the riding public. Instead of a single contract worth 2.2 billion pesos, Abaya supposedly split the deal into 3 smaller contracts, worth 3.8 billion pesos in total. However, this was only done after the first 2 rounds of bidding had failed. The second allegation, Buri didn't have the financial or technical capability to be the MRT's maintenance provider to begin with. The Korea-based Busan Transportation Corporation actually owns just 4% of Buri. The remaining 96% owned by local engineering firms. One of them allegedly with no papers with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Ito karagdagang mga ebidensya, karagdagang mga aligasyon na tingin namin dapat imbestigahan ng ombudsman. Merong pinaburan, may kumita habang milyon ang nagdusa.
Bayan says this should serve as a warning to the current administration not to engage in any questionable deals. The group even says the government should simply take over MRT maintenance for good.
Kung babalik na naman tayo sa privatization, may papaboran na naman tayong private interest, gagawing negosyo na naman ito, kawawa na naman po ang commuters.
In November alone, the MRT has experienced 43 glitches so far, including 2 serious incidents wherein a passenger lost her arm and a car uncoupled from the main train.
Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre says the National Bureau of Investigation is looking into a possible sabotage angle in the latest incident at the MRT. One of its coaches detached from the train last week. NBI Director Dante Guieran says they are in the early stages of the investigation.
Specific ko ituloy yung angle ng sabotage.
For the NBI?
For the NBI. Kasi mukhang mayroong basehan. Kasi sinasabi doon na mahirap mangyari yung makakalas yung dalawang coach. Kasi makikita naman natin na kahit na-derail ng tren, kahit tumumba na yan, magkakabit pa rin eh. Kaya kung talagang walang human intervention, it's really very hard na mangyari yun.
We have started elicitation, some minor facts.
The House of Representatives wants Supreme Court Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno to face her accusers and defend herself in this week's hearing or impeachment hearing. But Sereno's camp is saying no. A lawmaker also warns of a possible constitutional crisis should High Court order a stop to the proceedings. Our Joyce Ilas tells us more.
Lawmakers are inviting Supreme Court Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno to attend the hearing on Wednesday, when the Committee on Justice convenes to decide if there is probable cause to impeach her. But Sereno's spokesperson says the Chief Justice isn't inclined to do so. Now, House Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez says Sereno's absence will only strengthen the charges against her.
Pagka hindi ka pumunta doon, deemed accepted lahat ng mga yung mga pinreceive na doon at saka yung mga allegations laban sa kanya.
House Justice Committee Chairperson Ray Umali also says it would seem Sereno is waiving her right to confront her accusers.
To the extent that she cannot controvert whatever will be presented as evidence in the hearing, then that may be counted against her.
But Sereno's spokesperson Josa de Inla disputes this. She says the Chief Justice wants to do this through her lawyers.
The Chief Justice intends to exercise that right through her counsel. And if we deny her right to counsel, her right to cross-examine will also necessarily be denied. So actually, ano nangyayari dito, hindi waiver, deprivation of right.
But Alvarez insists otherwise.
Kailangan niya sagutin ito personal. Kung yung abogado lang niyang ipadala niya doon, hindi namin inimbita yung abogado.
Umali also points out under House rules, only the resource persons are allowed to speak, and not their lawyers. The INLA says if the committee refuses to let Sereno's lawyers speak on her behalf, they might question the move before the Supreme Court.
Malinaw naman na exclusive yung jurisdiction ng House of Representatives. Ang bihira ng mga abogado yan.
Should Sereno's lawyers still push through with the plan and the Supreme Court stops the impeachment proceedings, Umali says this might lead to a constitutional crisis.
They can always raise anything to the Supreme Court, but insofar as the Committee on Justice is concerned, we do believe that impeachment cases are beyond the power of judiciary. That will definitely court a constitutional crisis.
Dangerous Drugs Board employees accuse their former chief of extravagant foreign trips and receiving favors from a suspected narco politician. Malacanang says these are some of the reasons the president asked Dionisio Santiago to resign. Malacanang says former Dangerous Drugs Board chief Dionisio Santiago was sacked for going on extravagant junkets abroad.
One of the complaints that reached the president was a trip to Austria, where in addition to bringing family members, General Santiago brought 6 of his closest personnel, including a Girl Friday. And then there was also mention of a trip to the United States, indicating last month, meaning 1 month before October, a trip to the United States where he, quote, allegedly bringing with him his mistress and selective favorite DDB employees.
Quoting a news report, the complaint also says Santiago, as PIDEA chief, received a house allegedly from Reynaldo Paruhinog, the Osamis city mayor who was killed in an anti-drug operation last July. Roque says Santiago's case proves the president will not tolerate even a, quote, whiff of corruption, unquote, among government officials. Malacanang is leaving it up to the ombudsman to investigate the allegations against Santiago. Lawyers are reacting after President Rodrigo Duterte spoke about a possible declaration of a revolutionary government. Here's our senior correspondent David Santos with that story.
President Duterte over the weekend blasted the media once again for supposedly twisting his words on his pronouncements to declare a revolutionary government.
I said, if things go out of control at tumagilid yung gobyerno, yun ang predicate ko. It was not an outright statement na alam mo na.
With the bad press he has been getting, the president is now hinting that he will avoid speaking to journalists, a threat he dropped and made good for a while early on in his term.
Did always omit the predicate. Kung tumagilid ang bayan ko, and I see revolutionaries bringing firearms on the streets, well, maybe wag ka na magdalawang isip. I will declare a revolutionary government.
Taken out of context or not, lawyers still see the president's pronouncement as a risky threat.
That is a very dangerous proposal. That is a very deadly proposal.
Kung mangyari at nagtagumpay, ibig sabihin ito ay pagbabasura dun sa ating konstitusyon.
Pag na-declare ng revolutionary government, wala na. In fact, there is no more constitutional basis for the existence of the Supreme Court.
Adiel Dan Fajardo, president of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, says the current conditions do not merit the declaration of a revolutionary government. Fajardo adds democratic institutions are well in place despite perceived attempts to downgrade them. The IBP is holding a two-day human rights summit this week in a bid to re-examine their profession and revisit their priorities, which is primarily to uphold rule of law and access to justice and human rights amid the government's brutal war on drugs.
Lawyers at this point in time have to stand behind the truth and not behind power. We cannot be shaken by the frenzy of the mob.
I think the popularity siguro it's because also of the new phenomenon of social media, no? Somehow tilted the balance towards a strong executive department.
The IBP currently has about 60,000 member lawyers across the country, and President Duterte, including some of his closest allies, are among them.